What is this weed growing in my lawn? Do weed killers impact my well water? And what's going on with my Crepe Myrtle? Folks, I've got answers to these questions and more coming up on Garden Sense. Hey everybody, I'm Tim Ward and welcome back to Garden Sense. Well, folks, we are now officially in August, and I'll tell you what, I had hundreds of emails come through my inbox last week, and surprisingly, a lot of them dealt with weeds or weed killers. But we also got some questions about lawn disease, overall health of plants. So we actually selected 4 questions from that massive influx of emails to address here on this week's video. So buckle up, everybody. Let's jump right in. The first question is from Sergio. Hi, Tim. The attached photo is from our front lawn. A wetter spot than most since it constantly catches the runoff from a neighbor's driveway. There are a few patches of this and I can't seem to get rid of it. Can you help? So this looks like buttonweed, which is a pretty common weed to find, and it's pretty active this time of year. Now there are a couple varieties. Could be common buttonweed, it could be Virginia buttonweed, but the good news is in terms of trying to get rid of it, it's relatively easy. Now, there are a couple of products that we would recommend. The first would be Image All-in-One Weed Killer. We talk about this product a lot here on this program, and obviously it's available over at Rosen's Online. Another product that would be pretty effective is actually called Weed Free Zone. I know we've also talked about it a little bit here on this video as well. Either one of those products are going to be effective against buttonweed. Now, depending on how pervasive it is, you might have to make 2 applications. So depending on which product you choose, just make sure you read the label carefully in terms of how often you can apply. But both of those products should help clear up the problem. The next question is from Galen. Hi, Tim. A family member recently built a new home requiring a new well, and the land was hydroseeded. It is now covered with weeds. What would be the best way to fertilize grass and suppress the weeds without contaminating the well? So I'll be perfectly honest with you. With the EPA regulations that we now have in this country, any type of off-the-shelf fertilizer or weed control product is not going to impact your water well unless you are dumping the product directly into the well. I have lived my entire life on a well. I am currently on a well, and I have no problem using any of the products that I'm going to suggest here to you. Again, I have pets, I'm married, I have children, and I never ever worry about using these products because I know that they're not going to impact my well water. In terms of fertilizing, you can absolutely use Turf Trust. Turf Trust is probably the best fertilizer on the market, which is why it's the only fertilizer that we sell. And so again, there's no issues at all in terms of your well water unless you dump a bag of that stuff directly into the water. The second thing is, in terms of killing weeds, you can use something like an Image All-in-One Weed Killer. We just talked about it in the last question. You can use Weed Free Zone. You can use Buttonweed's Weed Beater Ultra. Folks, all of these products are designed to kill the weeds, but not seep into your well water. Again, if that were the case, the EPA would never approve these. And believe me, bringing these products to market requires a registration with the EPA. That's why when a weed killer comes to market, it takes years sometimes to get EPA approval because of all the testing, all the paperwork, all the legal protections, things like that. So there's a lot that these weed killers have to go through to make sure that they're safe for consumer use. I understand that there have been abuses in the past, and I totally get that. And I appreciate the question about wanting to make sure that your well water is safe. But again, as someone who personally uses these products on my lawn and I live on a well, I can tell you that to fertilize, you want to use Turf Trust. And then for weed control, I prefer Image All-in-One Weed Killer just because it's a more effective product. But again, Buttonweed's Weed Beater Ultra is great, and obviously Weed Free Zone. And all the products that I mentioned are available over at rosensonline.com. The third question is from Lynn. Tim, I planted a new Crepe Myrtle white tree a month ago. I watered it every day and fertilized it with Plant Trust, yet it looks so poor. Can you advise on what to do? So Planting a crepe myrtle in July, frankly, is not the ideal time. I understand sometimes you can't control when a tree has to be planted, but the ideal time for crepe myrtles is going to be very late fall or very early spring. So the fact that you did it during the summer means that it requires a little bit more maintenance than it probably normally would. And the biggest thing that you have to worry about is making sure that those roots really take hold. And when the roots take hold, the tree is really going to thrive. And when I look at the picture, to me, that's the issue. That's what's going on here, is that the roots just aren't fully established. And then again, the shock of being transplanted in the summertime, again, when heat can really impact a tree, I'm not surprised that it's struggling a little bit. But here's a couple of things I would recommend. First of all, you don't want to feed it plant truss. You're not hurting it at all, but garden truss is the better option for crepe myrtles, because crepe myrtles produce those big, bright, beautiful blooms, and a garden truss is formulated to help with blooming. Plant truss is going to help more with the foliage. So again, you haven't hurt the tree, but in terms of the fertilizer, garden truss is a better choice. Now, let's talk about the root system. What you need to do right now is start giving the tree some kickstart. You can use the kickstart as a foliar spray. You can use it as a soil drench, but I would use kickstart and really soak this tree and its root system at least once a week for the next 4 to 6 weeks and see if we can't help get it established. There could be a little bit of disease going on with it, but again, it's probably simply an issue of the tree is just simply not strong enough to fight anything off. And so again, I would hesitate to recommend any type of a disease control product. First, let's give it some garden truss. Let's make sure we hit it with kickstart for the next 4 to 6 weeks, and then let's reassess. If it continues to get worse, we may have to go ahead and use a disease control product on it, but I don't want to do that just yet. Obviously, garden truss, kickstart, they're available over at Rosen's Online. The final question for today is from Jim. Tim, I have a good bit of crabgrass this year. Do you recommend spray pump or hose end sprayer for applying image? So frankly, the real answer is it just comes down to preference, but there are a couple of situations where I will prefer a hose end sprayer over a backpack sprayer or a pump sprayer. Now, if it's a small area or it's an area that is perhaps up against some desirable plants, say that the weeds that I'm trying to kill are up next to hostas or something like that, for an example, I would actually use a tank sprayer for that and a pump sprayer, and I would actually walk around because it allows me to hit a target area in a very small area. I can get very close to plants without spraying it on other plants. And so the tank sprayer, the pump sprayer, well, it actually allows for more control. If I have a very large area, then obviously I want to use a tool that allows me to maximize how much area I'm able to hit in a single pass, and that would 100% be a hose end sprayer. So if it's pretty pervasive, and it sounds like the crabgrass is pretty pervasive, the hose end sprayer, the hose end applicator is probably your best bet. However, if those areas are up next to desirable plants that could be injured by that image, then in those cases, I would definitely use a pump sprayer just because it gives me a little bit more control. All right, folks, just a couple final thoughts before we wrap up this week's video podcast. Folks, we are in August, and so naturally we are looking ahead to that September timeframe when we can begin the overseeding process. Now, I mentioned last week that we're actually going to be releasing a newly created overseeding video. That's something that's going to happen in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, we do want to start thinking about killing weeds, and I know a lot of you are already doing that, hence all of the questions this week regarding weed killing. So make sure that you head over to rosensonline.com and check out all of the weed control products that we have available there. I promise that if there's a weed in your lawn, we have something that can help you kill it. So again, head over to rosensonline.com and make sure you check out our selection. Now, we're also getting a lot of questions about just the overall health of plants. Again, it's really hot, very dry. in some parts of the country right now. And so we really recommend, folks, that you are using Kickstart and making sure that you're implementing it in your gardens, on your trees, on your shrubs, and obviously on your lawn. Folks, I talk about this product all the time. I've already talked about it once today because it's such an effective product. Head over to rosensonline.com. You can buy it by the bottle, you can buy it by the case, but it is absolutely something that your plants are really going to want and crave and frankly take advantage of this time of year as we are entering into these really hot days of summer. Folks, I know I got hundreds of emails last week and I'm a little bit behind in terms of responding to all of them, but please keep sending them. If you've got a question and you want it to be featured on this video podcast, or you just need answers to your problems, then make sure you send an email directly to me, tim@rosensonline.com. Again, if I receive it, I promise I will respond. The volume was so high this past week, I am definitely behind right now, but please be patient. I promise I will get back to you. Folks, as always, we really appreciate the time that you spend with us each and every week. I hope you guys have an amazing rest of the week. God bless.